You're watching Notepad. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. COVID-19 is still dominating the conversation right now in the market. And because of that, there's a lot of conversations around pharmaceutical companies as well. And it's about time that we've had a pharmaceutical company joining us in a way. Joining me is one Amir-Jeffery, one Abdul Majid, the COO of Duopharma Biotech Berhad. Duopharma Biotech is, of course, formerly known as CCM. The last time we've had CCM over on this show was a few years ago, so it's a timely reminder for us to actually bring them on again. This time round, we shall talk a little bit more about halal pharmaceutical business and what it means for consumers. So, Jeffrey, let's take a quick stock take in terms of what it means to be a halal pharma player right now.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Thank you for inviting us. Well, to be a halal pharmaceutical player means that you have to do a couple of things. Be prepared in terms of good manufacturing practice and ensuring that whatever you produce meets the regulatory requirements. And at the same time, as halal pharmaceutical demands, you definitely need to make sure that you adhere to, in Malaysia, to the MS 2424 2019 halal pharmaceutical standards. So it is essentially a differentiator for Duopharma Biotech. Halal pharmaceuticals is an element that differentiates players that pursues halal pharmaceuticals from others. And that essentially is important because you have a particular market that you would like to address.
Okay.
And the demand for halal pharmaceuticals is growing. As you see, Muslim population growing. Information is easily disseminated. You have a lot more people who are interested in halal pharmaceuticals, not just in Malaysia, but also globally. And we talk about Europe, we talk about in the US and other parts of the world. So what it means to be a halal pharmaceutical player is that the market is out there for you to pursue.
Okay.
Yeah.
When somebody talks about halal something, there has to be that binary relationship of non-halal something.
Yeah.
So are we now experiencing a time where everything right now in the market is non-halal pharmaceutical?
No, that's not true. Where we are now is in a stage where we are in the process of creating awareness about halal pharmaceuticals. In terms of specifically what you mentioned earlier, whether we have all non-halal pharmaceuticals, non-certified halal pharmaceuticals, or halal pharmaceuticals, it is currently where we are seeing in Malaysia in particular about 9% of whatever is produced in Malaysia is halal certified over total market. So we have countries with different types of certification bodies. And in Malaysia we have JAKIM. JAKIM is essentially an independent government body that looks at certification of various halal products, including halal pharmaceuticals. And we are very lucky to have that kind of setup in Malaysia because not all countries have that kind of setup where they have an independent body. Most of them have a non-government organization or a body that has interest in the business.
Yeah,
so
see, the certification of halal is very well renowned, and associations like HDC, Halal Development Corporation, for instance, definitely enhances that. As a consumer point of view, if I take a tablet today, do I really need to be concerned whether it's halal or not?
You do, because not everything is halal. Okay, so in short, not everything is halal. But basically what we are trying to do now is to ensure that whatever we produce in Duopharma meets the certification requirements, that everything that we produce are halal. And currently that is the case. And I think with the MS 2424 in place, that means the standards are available and companies can basically ensure that they are aligned to that standard. And I think that the market is the one that dictates it, and we need to ensure that Malaysians or Muslims in particular should demand for it, should ask for it, and make sure that that awareness is there. And in doing so, in trying to create the awareness, we have to go out there and make sure that the market, the consumers, the different stakeholders are aware of what halal pharmaceuticals is.
So, you see, is this a similarity where we can draw from the finance industry, where prior to having at that point in time, Islamic Banking Act being created, everybody was subjected to that single rule of banking, and there's a lot of element of riba, gharar, and many other non-Sharia compliant elements inside it. But because the 1980s saw a rise in legislation in terms of Islamic banking, the 1990s therefore saw a greater adoption or market awareness of the relationship where consumers need to adopt for Sharia products. Is that where we are now when it comes to the halal pharmacy business?
Yeah, I believe so. This MS 2424 as a standard came out back in 2011. So prior to that, in 1996, where Duopharma or CCM back then, CCM Duopharma Biotech Berhad, had its first over-the-counter product certified as halal. So in terms of awareness, we are quite a long way away compared to halal or Islamic banking, for example. Because there is some concern about how do you promote halal pharmaceuticals in the context of medication or compliance to a drug when you do not have 100% halal raw materials that goes into the manufacturing of the products, for example. So there are different processes or work that is being done towards trying to develop that the integrity of manufacturing of halal pharmaceuticals. And we can talk about the various different things, including...
I do want to talk about it, definitely.
Including development of halal pharmacopoeia, for example. There are
Sorry,
British...
say again,
a pharmacopoeia is basically like a compendium of materials, raw materials that is used in manufacturing of pharmaceutical products. So there's a British pharmacopoeia, there's the North American pharmacopoeia, if I'm not mistaken. And if we had that document in place, it tells you what is halal and it tells you what is not halal. And manufacturers in particular can just refer to it and see which of these products or raw materials that they want to source for the manufacturing of their products has halal certification or not. So that way you do not actually produce products and then test for whether it's halal.
So it's not retrospective?
It's not retrospective. It is built in.
By design,
Yes. So it's halal built in, it's not tested for. So in that context, this is...
Doesn't have to be tested
for halal anymore, because you have started the whole entire process. So if you start with that, and then you have, along the production value chain as well as delivery value chain, logistics, storage, and so on and so forth, down to management, you look at the overall perspective of halal built in, then you will ensure that the products that you are manufacturing and delivering to the consumers are halal. And very clearly, these are raw materials that are not halal, then you don't go for those. You just only secure those products or raw materials that are halal.
It seems like there's a lot of pain, no pun intended, a lot of pain in terms of reorienting your business.
There is.
The payoff is one thing, but to have to restructure how you do your thing, it is only justifiable if there is a strong market demand for it, the way I look at it.
That's right.
Is there a strong market demand for this?
I think we have to, in Malaysia, there is demand for halal pharmaceuticals.
How? Could you share with us some numbers or percentages? I don't know.
Well, okay, from manufacturing perspective, 9% out of the 8 billion ringgit value of halal pharmaceutical product in Malaysia, market in Malaysia, is halal at this point in time.
And this was worked out by?
This is by IQVIA. data from IQVIA
Yeah.
and their market intelligence. And what we do is we basically look at that and see how many of these products are actually halal certified. And it's available in the JAKIM website now.
Okay.
And we can also know how many percentage of our products in the context of the total market is actually halal. So we are supplying about 77% of those halal market.
Okay, so you're addressing about 4 or 5% of the total 8 billion market.
Pretty much, more or less.
Okay.
But in terms of demand for it, you can see that it is growing. It is growing because we have done surveys. We were working with the University Kebangsaan Malaysia, where they did a survey of consumers on halal pharmaceuticals, and it was found that people are looking for halal pharmaceuticals. They are seeking for halal pharmaceuticals when they go to pharmacies.
Okay.
Right? Given that it is in largely Muslim neighborhoods, communities.
But if there is a market for it, there's a market for it.
There's a market for it.
Yeah.
So there's a market for it because
having said that, it's not
Malaysian.
halal pharmaceutical, just like internet banking, it's not restrictive just for the Muslim population as well.
It's not. It's not. That's the other point that I'm trying to get at, is that halal pharmaceuticals is for all, for everyone. Essentially, it is a universal value. Islam as a religion dictates that you have to eat products which are not impure, they are pure. Similarly, when you look at consuming medicines or supplements for that matter, you should go with products that have halal certification, which means that it has been certified halal under MS 2424 in Malaysia.
But this is a market where it is sensitive towards searching for halal products.
Yep.
There's a larger bunch of market, or at least a sizable bunch of market, where they are insensitive towards a pharmaceutical product being halal or otherwise. Yeah. But they might be more sensitive towards meeting FDA standards, meeting cleanliness standards, all the other health standards. Yeah. And what would be some of the attraction for this kind of group of people to opt in for halal pharmacy products?
In order for a product to receive halal certification for halal pharmaceuticals, it has to first of all meet GMP requirements. The good manufacturing practice certification by National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Authority of Malaysia. Okay. So if in the US you call them the US FDA, right? In the UK they're called NHS and so on and so forth. So these bodies basically review applications for registration of their products in the markets concerned. So in Malaysia it's NPRA. In order for you to get halal certification under MS 2424, you must get GMP certification from MPRA first. And if you lose your halal certification, you don't necessarily lose your GMP. In that context, what we are saying is that GMP stands for safety, efficacy, and quality. And halal stands for purity and hygiene, right? So these values are all important, not just to the Muslims, not
it's
just
also
to those who are
consumers as well.
It's universal values again.
All right, very interesting conversation. We'll have a short break before we continue our conversation with Jeffrey after this. Welcome back. You are watching Notepad. We are talking about the halal pharmaceutical industry. Joining me is one Amir-Jeffery, the COO of Duopharma Biotech. From the point of the view of the consumer, what would be some of the medication that we're talking about right now that are already in the market where it is halal certified?
There are various drugs in different categories of therapeutic areas. We're talking about oncology drugs, we're talking about diabetes drugs, and so on and so forth. So there are various drugs that are being produced right now in our facility which addresses different therapeutic conditions. And these products are certified halal by JAKIM. The initial foray of Duopharma Biotech Berhad in terms of halal pharmaceuticals as I mentioned earlier, is broken down into two. One is the supplements or the over-the-counter products, which are also given halal certification. And secondly is the ethical or prescription drugs. Yeah? So these are drugs which are basically prescribed by doctors, so to patients, and then they go out to the pharmacies or they buy it from the clinics. Now, the progression of certification in Malaysia is twofold. First, it was using the food standards for the over-the-counter products, and then later on, MS 2424 came on board. So that's when the both OTC and also
prescribed drugs.
prescription drugs were able to get halal certification. And these drugs are produced in our plants, and also there's a few other companies in Malaysia that produces these. And it's supplied directly to the hospitals, and patients can go to pharmacies and buy them from over the counter, as well as through prescription. Now, essentially, the market is there for us to tap into for halal pharmaceuticals. The initial concern of not having a standard is now overcome. Yeah. Right. So the consumers are ready to basically be educated and made aware of halal pharmaceuticals, and I think that's key.
The general bigger picture here is that Malaysians are not as compliant in terms of taking prescribed drugs over a longer period of time as opposed to other markets, particularly when patients that suffer or who suffers non-communicable diseases like diabetes. Do you think that having such a pool like halal pharmacy or halal drugs might persuade them to be compliant a little bit more over long-term use of drugs?
We'd have to study that a bit further. I'm not sure if there would be an impact or improvement in terms of compliance when you talk about halal pharmaceuticals. However, I think what's important is that there are other initiatives in terms of making sure that compliance to drug consumption is undertaken.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the outreach that you guys are doing. The Halal Symposium webinar, what's that?
Okay, the Halal Symposium webinar was actually a collaboration between Halal Development Corporation, Duopharma Biotech Berhad, as well as KPJ Berhad. And it is essentially a series of events that will be taking place over the next couple of months. The focus for these three organizations, including us, is obviously to create awareness about the halal pharmaceutical ecosystem. When you talk about developing awareness about halal pharmaceutical, you wonder what exactly do you need to do in the context of bringing knowledge to the different stakeholders. And we definitely needed to start off with our internal staff, first of all, and then start looking at external stakeholders. Who exactly do we need to engage first? And we felt that together with HDC, obviously, is to engage with the clinicians and the healthcare professionals and so on and so forth, because they are the people fronting the organizations to provide healthcare to the consumers, and then address the consumers.
But would you agree with my statement if I would say that the consumers are not starting at a zero-based knowledge in terms of halal pharmacy?
Yeah. You're right, Ibrahim. I think consumers, because in Malaysia in particular, halal food and beverages and increasingly halal lifestyle is becoming more and more important.
And they're aware of this.
They're aware.
It's not something that is out of the blue, left field.
It's not something out of the blue. I think it depends where we are and who we are talking about. If we're talking about, the urban folks, perhaps the awareness about halal pharmaceuticals is a lot more, widespread compared to the rural areas. But that's where we need to identify and understand the market a lot better. I think the partners in this symposium or webinar was basically looking at addressing the total ecosystem question of whether halal pharmaceutical has a robust ecosystem in Malaysia, and whether this ecosystem is now extending beyond globally, I think and as a global ecosystem, it is something not fairly strong as far as halal pharmaceuticals is concerned.
Sorry to draw this parallel again, but
Yeah.
even in the Islamic banking world, the Islamic
Yeah.
finance world, it's not widely spread, but it is permeating very well across Islamic countries.
Correct.
Do you see halal pharmacy doing that type or taking the same footpath the way Islamic banking does?
Yeah, it
Or
could.
did?
Yeah, it could. Whether I see it happening, I think there's a lot of brainstorming that parties need to do in order to address or develop a strategy towards that.
What about this Standards and Metrology Institute of Islamic Countries, SMIIC?
Yeah.
Is this one of the vehicles that you can use to
yeah.
actually raise awareness amongst the consumers of Islamic countries?
I think so. I think the reason why SMIIC, as you mentioned, is now leading as a committee to look at developing halal pharmaceutical awareness and ecosystem amongst OIC countries is a fact that they recognize that halal pharmaceuticals is an important subject matter to be addressed. There's a demand for it, and the demand is increasing, not just in Muslim countries. So SMIC is recognizing that this is an important subject matter to be addressed, and Malaysia is leading that. We have Prof. Zari Ismail, who's been appointed, he's with University of Science Malaysia, and he's been around promoting halal pharmaceutical agenda in Malaysia and in the region for quite some time. So I think we're lucky to have a Malaysian leading that SMIC committee to discuss about how can this halal pharmaceutical agenda be a lot more mainstream.
Okay.
Yeah.
Final question for you.
Sure.
Do you think that competitors like yourselves within this industry needs to band together at least to promote and forward an agenda such as the halal pharmacy movement?
I think
Set aside your differences,
Yeah.
move as one.
I think there are different stakeholders that needs to work together. The industry should be working together with the government agencies, with HDC, with Islamic Development Bank, who was also part of the halal webinar.
Oh.
And these are parties or stakeholders who have the authority and interest to actually propagate such a subject matter to ensure that the Muslims' requirements and that universal values that we were talking about earlier is fully understood and actually marketed across the world. I think it's important to band together in that sense to focus on developing a halal pharmaceutical ecosystem that is robust. And one of the key items in that halal ecosystem is a global standard, because you don't want to go from one country to another having to register to a different standard or adhere to a different standard.
In that sense, this would be a little bit easier as opposed to adhering to the standards of Islamic finance. Would you say that?
It would be, yeah. If we were to be able to actually achieve that, then that would be one major obstacle that would enable a better widespread agenda on halal pharmaceuticals to go across borders.
Do you have any wish list from the government? If I had Tan Sri Muhyiddin here, Tan Zafrul here, what would be some of the comments that you would want from them?
The government has for a long time looked at halal as a main economic driver for the country. Halal pharmaceuticals is something a bit new. What's important is to recognize the potential of that industry as an industry in Malaysia, first of all, and then the halal aspect of that industry or the products that we're producing. I think if we recognize economically or socio-economically, Muslims are growing globally, the population is growing, and awareness of non-Muslims about the benefits of halal is also growing, and that's contingent on us promoting that as well. I think there's something that we could basically convince the government to look at seriously in terms of incentives, looking at it in terms of export market promotion, giving it the stamina it needs to see it grow. I think that those things are critical in terms of growth of the industry, not just in Malaysia but also globally.
So more tax cuts for people who are doing Halal Pharma.
That'd be great.
Okay, great. That is our conversation with Duopharma Biotech. I just spoke to the CEO of that company, Amir-Jeffery. If you've missed any part of this interview, just head on to Astro AWANI. Look for Notepad over there. Plenty of interviews like this can be found there. You can also watch these kind of interviews on your mobile devices. Just download the Astro AWANI app wherever you get the application. Until then, thanks very much for listening in and watching in. Goodbye.